Vasudha. It's wonderful to meet you after such a long time. Welcome to Chat with Chitra. How are you doing?
Fine, it's my pleasure to reconnect with you after so long. And thank you for having me in your chat program.
Thank you. Tell me something about your growing up years.
I grew up in Mumbai, and growing up in Mumbai is a very educative experience because it's a very cosmopolitan place. You come across different languages and different cultures, and you have to be very smart because it's an aggressive way of life. It's a fast-paced life.
Right.
So I feel very grateful that I got a chance to experience Bombay life because it prepared me for the rest of my life. And when you see people who grew up in Bombay, they have certain brand of smartness that perhaps you may not find in people growing up, say in Chennai or any other smaller cities. So I grew up there. I went to school in St. Anthony's in Chembur. Then the confusing years of my life started because after school, it's always a quandary because nowadays you have career guidance and so many things. And then you really didn't know what to take. And we are so attracted to so many things. But basically, when we were growing up, we could do like BA, BCom or BSc.
Right.
So all my friends were doing BCom. So I also did BCom. So, only for that reason. But not because I was in any way a numbers person or was connected to the business world. When I went to the first two lectures, I knew that that's not what I'm interested in. So I spent about 4 of my college years, at least out of 5, in nearby cafes and had fun. Somewhere there, I understood also what I was interested in. So then, although it was a bit of I had to digress from what I had done all these years. I went in for a master's in psychology. Yeah, I did a master's in clinical psychology and prepared myself to be a therapist, a psychotherapist. I also studied different psychoanalysis and rational emotive therapy and all of that. And and I also did journalism.
Right.
And, so that was it was fun to do it, but also I got many experiences because I used to go and meet underprivileged people. I used to go to the crematorium and see the processes there and how the people in the crematorium barely survived. I used to go to, cabaret dance, joints and see what kind of suffering lay behind all that. So I got to see a lot of the world during my journalism days. So that was really educative and interesting and open-minded. And I also got to see many celebrities because I could interview them and write about them and things like that. So the years in Bombay were wonderful. And I also fell in love. I ended up meeting Prakash, who's my husband now. That was my Bombay phase. That was really one segment of my life. And that was it. Then thereon, I moved to Saudi Arabia for almost 5-6 years, I think. Yeah.
Right. So very interesting. I'm sure exploring different options during your younger years has actually opened a lot of doors, right? Not only like, in terms of opportunities, but also in your perspective, right?
Yeah. And one more thing I did in those days, it was not so common. I was to work off my confusions, I hitchhiked around Europe, just me, and then a friend joined me. So that was another experience which taught me to be resourceful and understand world cultures to some extent at that age. See, I just took off. I told my parents I have saved some money from working here and there, and my parents said, "What? Why will you go hitchhike? Who does that?" I said, "I do it." Uh, I took the cheapest flight out of Mumbai and then went around Switzerland here and there. I was really impressed with those countries, the way the Western culture, how organized they were and how clean they were. That impressed me, how pretty Europe was.
Yeah.
So before I was like in my 20s, early 2021, I had seen a gamut of things. And I was all like ready, very motivated and ready for life. So that was.
I've always seen you as a very high spirited, very cheerful, and not only that, you are a very ambitious person, if I may say so,
Yes,
because
I am.
the kind of the amazing work that you do, speaks for itself. But this thought of moving towards an inclusive education, what actually prompted you to take this?
I think it was a journey and a process because when I moved to Saudi Arabia, just to keep a continuity in the story. that was from an outside, like a spirited world, to an inside world, because Saudi Arabia had a lot of its own restrictions. And when I landed in Saudi Arabia, the first thing my mother-in-law said, "This is my first gift to you," and that was that abaya, the burqa, that you have to wear it wherever you go. Uh, so that was a completely, Bombay was like outward, and this was like an inward experience. And I joined the school. So that's probably my first foray into education and that world. So when I joined school, I also worked a lot with children who had difficulties, even in the regular environment.
Oh,
And yes, and I used to use a lot of music and fun ways and games. And I was already attracted to that kind of a thing. And so little seeds were already sown at that point.
mm.
And given the background of work, I was a psychotherapist in Mumbai, and I had also started working with children with learning disabilities in Mumbai before I came to Saudi. So I already had a slight inclination towards that. So in Saudi Arabia, the teaching was very attractive for me. It was such a progressive and upward movement that you can actually touch children's lives, and you can show them that life is beautiful, and you can pass on some of your enthusiasm. So that was wonderful. And right at that time, I knew that it's one of the things I will do in life is education.
I presume that would be the starting for this wonderful
Journey.
What are the most important values in mental health care, and which, in your view, is the most important, especially when you work with children
with special needs? I shifted from mental health, working with people who are of developmentally fine, but who were affected by perhaps what we used to call some neurosis or depression, clinical depression, bipolar, or even schizophrenia or some kind of psychosis and that kind of thing. That was what I was working. That was a population I was working with before.
right.
When I went from Saudi Arabia, I moved to the US.
Okay.
When I moved to the US, rather than go into, with my recent exposure in school and education, rather than go back into mental health as such in psychiatric care, I moved into education. And because I thought it was a very good amalgam, that you have a background in therapy and counseling, but also you go deeper into special needs. I joined a doctoral program in special education. It's a very deep question, actually. If you look at a child is always, if you think of the child as one circle, even a child with special needs is a child. Okay. So a little part, a sliver of that child is affected by some condition, but that condition is not the child. So what I'm trying to say is that you cannot, the child is not entirely defined by that condition. The child is not the condition. The child is the child with the condition. So when we work with special needs, we always have to work with a thought that we are working with the child, and then we do certain things to complete his cognition or complete wherever he has any difficulties. So that is a philosophy that we have to work. So right there, our attitude is one of inclusion. So it's not like, oh, they are another category of children and these are another category. They're children. All of them are children. Okay? And then here we work with them to see, to cope with certain things that they intrinsically may not have.
Right. The word mental health is most often, especially in places like Asia, is regarded as a taboo topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So about 75% of the population, they don't even want to seek any professional help. That's what our studies show. What exactly, in your view, is mental health can be referred to as a mental illness, or is it a well-being? How do you actually define mental health?
A mind and body is always integrated. There's no separation. Just your physical, like when you are young, all influences go from outside to inside. So long as there's a lot of physical comfort, you're mentally comfortable. Okay. As we grow older, so like the more you work on a child's body, the mind is also formed. So as we grow older, the more our mind is at peace, our physical body is fine. So the minute we have some mental stress, it starts showing on our body in various ways. Our hands, if we're angry, everything shows. So mind and body are always connected, really. And you will not have good mental health if your physical health is not sound, and vice versa. So I would say that a healthy, whole, complete health consists of physical and mental well-being, and both of these are correlated.
I understand, because there should be a proper correlation between the physical and the mental health.
Yes.
More often we see that most of us are not able to balance between the two.
Yes, it is difficult. Like a small example, if you are mentally feeling fine, you don't have a problem even doing your exercise. If your will is weak, or if you're slightly depressed, then nothing matters. You don't want to do even basic things. So in order for us to even be physically fit, we need to have an emotional connect, emotionally feel integrated. So again, I'm coming back to the point that mental health consists of mental and physical health. So I would say that nowadays the mental health is jeopardized in so many ways because of the pressures that we live with and the expectations from society around us. We really cannot be ourselves. When our thinking, feeling, and doing are in sync, we are usually balanced. Suppose we think our thoughts are very different and our feelings are something else, and we are forced to do something else, then you don't feel integrated or you don't feel comfortable. So there is a certain angle of having the courage of conviction. My first point is mental health consists of physical health, and physical health consists of mental health. If there is no proper mental health, it will be hard to keep our physique healthy. And if there's no physical health, we won't be able to keep our mind healthy. So we have to be very careful about that balance. Even though we have so many pressures from outside, it's very important for us to have anchors in life, so that we don't become too disaligned, and we're able to be honest about the way we live, or we are able to walk the path that we think we should. So this whole thinking, feeling, and doing to be aligned takes a certain courage, conviction, and honesty. So I think it all hangs together. Mental health, mental illness is that when we are not able to cope with several things, and that can be like mild mental illness, but also sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes it's actually an illness. You fall ill mentally. Something. It could be genetic, it could be chemical, it could be neurotransmitters, and those have to be handled just like a medical problem, and also supplemented with therapies.
So beautifully put. Yeah. As you say rightly, we need a proper balance.
Yes.
Education for all is something, I strongly believe. Over the years, we are clearly seeing a marked change where we have inclusion in education and in other forms as well. So disability in inclusive education. I mean, with my little bit of research and knowledge I have gained over in the years, I feel we do still need effective models for inclusive education. What do you think are the current challenges that we face as the founder CEO of the We Excel Foundation Educational Trust? What do you see the challenges for an inclusive education, especially India as such?
Yes, sure. There is no such thing as equality. There is only equal opportunities. Everybody is different, but then we all should have an even play field, so to speak. So we do believe very much in our organization to make sure that there is access to whatever the child needs. In the US, there is a concept called LRE, which is called least restrictive environments. Sometimes we follow that because sometimes when children have a lot of severe autism, the regular environment is not perfect for him. So he needs some special handling of his environment. So then that is the least restrictive environment.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes, once they're ready with it and they're prepared for it, the inclusive education is, being in the regular school is very, very significant for him. Now, inclusion is an attitude. I think everybody has a place, and there is no such thing as a child with special needs cannot go to a regular school and have the same experiences. That's absolutely brutal and unfair. We really believe that every child should have the opportunity to study in a regular school. But that's actually very romantic. It can prove to be a very romantic notion, because given the educational system and the way the curriculum is geared, even the typical neurotypical people sometimes cannot cope. Put me in an 8th standard, I won't be able to pass it. I assure you, in 8th standard in India, I will fail. So it is that difficult, you see. So therefore, unless you have the correct modifications and accommodations, a child with special needs, it'd be difficult for them to study in a regular school after middle and high school. Primary years, yes, definitely they can be in a regular school and enjoy the company. And I'm telling you, children with special needs love to be in a regular school. They want to be in a regular school. They want to be with their peer group. They want to enjoy that. Yeah. And unless their sensory needs get overwhelmed, senses get overwhelmed and they just cannot cope physically with that, usually children do like to be in a regular school, at least intermittently, if not completely. Inclusive education is actually an attitude. For a principal of a school to say, no, he's not smart enough for my school, it's not fair. Children should be allowed to go to experience whatever they want to experience. And parents have a right to pursue what they feel their child should experience. Yes. Having said that, we must do what is best for the child, which is the LRE concept. What is least restrictive? If a child does not flourish in that environment, sure, there is now no harm in him being in a special environment. And maybe that is going to help him meet his potential. Even in the US, where inclusion as a mantra had started years and years ago, several years ago, even there, I don't think they have it absolutely figured out. People, keep running into problems. They have this co-teaching approach where there is a special teacher as well as a regular teacher in the classroom. But you are absolutely right. We really haven't cracked it, you see. It is a very difficult phenomenon. In India, I've seen several instances of inclusive education, and some of them for certain disabilities, it is workable. For learning disabilities, attention problems, even children with mild to moderate intellectual challenges, it's quite fine. People with cerebral palsy, visual impairment, hearing impairment, even then you can make enough accommodations. When it comes to cognitive impairment, severe autism, then it becomes very difficult because autism by its nature itself is a little complex. So people cannot fathom that a person who outwardly looks like this is actually really very, very intelligent. Or that a person who doesn't utter a word, he has so much to say. So like in our school, children with autism write copiously. They are so artistic. They are so much, they have richness of language and all of that. In a regular school, they don't have the time to invest in this autistic child and bring out these things in them. You see, it requires a kind of a special setup for these things to blossom forth. Yeah. So up to primary school, even the academics, children can cope and parents can help them cope. And after middle school and the high school, which the academics become extremely challenging, it's very tough to keep the child in that environment and do academically well. If he can be there and he can experience the regular environment and have his own curriculum, academic curriculum. Right. And then that works, yes. But this NIOS system also has been a good answer in India, National Open Schooling.
Yeah.
That is a good bridge. So many people go in for this National Open Schooling as well.
Right. How receptive are they to the kind of activities and workshops that you offer for their children?
Very much, very much. So I want to just retract a little bit to the previous question about inclusion. And I think the both are connected in some way. So we conduct a course on inclusive classroom and we call it the class apart, and we also have an online course called the integrated classroom. So we teach this whole process of inclusion like an 8-year-old would understand. We first dispel the fear of a disability. We explain in detail what are the similarities and differences. We talk in depth about normal development and therefore what is a little different in atypical development. And then we give strategies and songs and games that would include everybody so that the teacher is not fearful of the unknown, she doesn't feel. And then we give very practical strategies on how to deal with parents of special needs, parents who are regular, the regular parents will say, my child will catch that disability. They behave as if it's contagious. So we teach the school how to deal with regular parents. We teach the school how to prepare regular children to receive a child with special needs into their classroom. So we do a complete thorough course in which the principal's training is included, the custodial staff and the sweeper and everybody, the bus driver knows what is inclusion. So that is the depth with which the system has to buy into that whole concept for inclusion to, to succeed in a certain school. So this is a course, and I do recommend people to take this course, because then they open their minds and they shed their fear for
inclusion. Yeah.
Yes, it is a very difficult. They are very grief-stricken. It's very difficult for them to wrap their minds around this whole thing. You see, so initially when we do the consultation and we identify the problem, we are extremely careful. That is why the mental health training comes very handy. You see, how do you work with the parents? How do you work with the extended family? So we have a whole counseling department consisting of 6 counselors. Every parent gets counseling. Every grandparent gets counseling. Extended family, sister, sibling. We have a sibling group where siblings are supported through this whole thing, because it affects the whole family. A disability happens, it throws the whole family. So we have to do the complete support. We also have to be careful to not break their spirit, at the same time not give false hope.
Yeah.
So many times parents do ask, will he be cured? In how many months will he be cured? These are some of the questions which come up. And then that is when we say, yes, it's a work in progress and you're not alone in this. We will be working together. And this is a training that has to be ongoing. And we say that, every inch of the way, the minute he can be in regular school, we will be the one to talk to the regular school and make sure he's integrated. So it's a very strong, intense process of bringing the parent on. We put our heart and our soul and everything into this process of preparing the parent to deal with this big change.
It's equally important, isn't it, to get the confidence of the parents.
No, but they can't sustain it. Sometimes they feel that death is better. At least it's like it's finished, it's concluded, and it's but this is something they have to deal with, and it's very unpredictable.
Yeah.
And every stage, so they feel, okay, childhood is over. Now next bit, that's adolescence will bring its own challenges.
Yes.
Adulthood will bring its even greater challenges. So at every stage, as an organization, we support the parents at every point. That's what we aspire to do.
Amazing. I'm so very inspired that you've taken every detail into account. You've not left out anything, any stone unturned. So every aspect, both from the children's point of view and the parents and their families, is equally important to be considered and taken into account, right? Amazing.
Very difficult. The healing is sometimes lifelong. But our parents, we follow a philosophy called anthroposophy based on Rudolf Steiner's teachings. So we have found a lot of inroads into even preparing the parents and introducing a lot of spirituality into this whole thing.
Yeah.
So there is a huge spiritual cloud on this whole and recently many of our older students, we have placed them in jobs. 25 students have been placed in jobs, even people with autism, and they have been trained enough to carry themselves in those atmospheres, and we also have people with various cognitive issues wanting to marry. So we have a program teaching them about marriage, which even you and all regular people could do with, we give the training on everything from what things to buy, how to set up a home, how to change your linen, everything, personal hygiene, what is the difference between in-laws and parents, what is a behavior which is acceptable, not acceptable, who are relatives. So the whole gamut of training we give them if they are going to step into matrimony, so that there is a chance that the marriage will sustain. Even contraception, everything we put it on in the...
Right. So very inspiring. You aspire to have at least 100 schools to start with.
100. I kept saying I want to start 100 schools. And not schools as much as centers and hubs where people can come for assessment, for one-on-one remedial, early intervention, vocational, whatever. We've succeeded in doing 13 so far.
Amazing.
Found it difficult to scale. And money is also a problem. We have to make sure that they are sustainable.
Sure. What is your vision for the next 5-10 years for VXL? And do you think that there are a few gaps which you need to bridge in order to reach the point where?
Yes, many gaps. So I'm a dreamer and a very ambitious dreamer. I don't have any limit to my dreams. I have not given up my 100 centers aspiration at all. So hopefully we've cracked it now. We know how to do it. So the next 5 years, I hope to have as many satellite centers as possible. The problem is the villages and the hamlets, they have government schemes and programs, and the many more lot of the funding goes into that, and the cities have many programs, they have schools and they have many options. But the tier 2 towns, they don't have too many options, and they have lesser awareness also. So our focus has been the tier 2 towns. Like we have a school in Srirangam, Tirunelveli, Erode, Pollachi. Then we have in Nashik, Sholapur. And going forward, we want to look at Karur, and we want to look at small towns, not villages. So hopefully in the next 5 years, we would have established some more and given access to many more parents who need these services. Otherwise, they end up migrating to the cities, giving up their livelihood, giving up their businesses, and then, paying heavy rent and staying in the cities and feeling displaced and dislocated. Because there's a severe dearth for adult communities for special needs in India. Just because a child has got special needs, a parent is not going to dump them in any old place. They care. They want what they need for so even the socio-economic fit has to be there. So like a middle class family will aspire to put a child in a kind of something that suits whatever they are used to. So like our schools look extremely neat, and it is like they say, oh, yours is a rich school. Yes, we are not a rich school, but we believe in having kind of not a very sorry appearance. Just because it's a special school, it should look dumpy and it should look dreary. That is not it. Our schools are very well lit and beautiful, with beautiful pictures hanging on the walls and neat. So that is what I'm saying. We want to have community centers where it meets the middle class. People feel comfortable sending them. So that's a very big dearth for such things here. In fact, we have some land and we are trying to start on that process to have resource centers in regular schools, so that the parents feel comfortable in sending, even if they have special needs, sending them to regular school, and they have therapy and resources right there in the regular school. So there should be resource room and therapy centers within the schools themselves. So that is something I would really like to have, enter every regular school and say, okay, we can help you to set up a resource room. We can help you to set up a therapy room. Why don't you have some kind of a program that children with special needs can get their therapy right there and attend their classes also? To have a teacher training college, like in the US, in New Jersey, I always admired the model over there. It was a completely teacher education college. Like one department would be geography. A teacher would be taught to teach geography to primary, secondary, high school, special needs. So everything about, there's a depth in the way they do the teacher training. As against the B.Ed, which I'm so sorry to say, I would only call it pathetic. I would love to have a very state-of-the-art teacher training institute which prepares people for that. I'm going to stop with the 5 because 5 is a good number. I want to have a recreational center, like a club for, but in an inclusive model. It's not only for people with special needs, but a club where you have facilities for socializing for persons with special needs and young adults. So you have a sports, you have table tennis for other people, but you also have a sport which is suitable for people with special needs. And we have a swimming pool where even these people can come. So I want to have a community center for socializing. So these are some 5 things I would like, I'm putting on record, although my list is long.
Amazing, amazing. I'm sure it's not an easy process, but the way how you rightly said in the beginning, you are a dreamer, you are a high achiever. So when we have very strong and focused goals ahead of us, I'm sure the universe will help us in achieving them. Right?
Certainly, I certainly hope. Yeah, I would be very, very happy and gratified if we are able to accomplish things. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, it's a wonderful service that we're doing to the entire humanity, I would say, because this is something which will actually open up the minds of so many people, not only parents, those who have differently able children, but also the individuals who do not have any kind of disability as such, to accept. We all have this pandemic which is affected all over so many people across the globe. It has affected the mental health of several people and children especially because they are mostly they stay put inside their homes. So as a result, it could have led to a lot of frustration, anxiety. How best can we start engaging young people when they are, with limited resources because of the pandemic?
Yeah. Initially, this was very good because parents always shied away a little bit from spending time with their children with special needs. So the first couple of months, it really was a romantic and a lovely experience because they got to know each other. They knew the children inside out. So that was wonderful. And now going forward, it's becoming increasingly difficult for parents to cope with this child being, because many of them are not even verbal. So they can't express their frustration at being cooped up at home, sensory problems. People don't live in large homes here. You see, it's just could be getting really claustrophobic also for them. One of the things, of course, we did all these Zoom classes and doing therapy online and so on. And now they're coming out of the years with that. You see, they're not able to sit in front of the computer for hours and do whatever it is. What we have started doing is we've started getting children back for therapy. So they are not like groups sitting together and things like that. It's not a whole day school, but at least they wear their masks and sanitize themselves, and they can come to school. And in one room, it is one therapist and one child, or it can be like two children and two therapists, and far away from each other. So we've started offering reasons for children to step out, come to school, especially the ones who have severe behavior issues and not be able to cope. They come to school for therapy. My personal belief is you can't live in fear indefinitely, and we will probably die sooner of depression and not being able to cope than of COVID. So we have to find a middle ground and start getting children out with the proper safety measures and start therapy. Or start 1 hour, 2 hour sessions. Though many parents are afraid, we encourage them to deal with their fears and start coming out.
Yeah, it's a good start, and I'm sure people will try to use this opportunity that you have started.
All these months, we used to send them many programs to do at home, curriculum, all of that. But now even that is tapering off. You see, people are not able to just sit at home and do that. They don't have that sustenance to continue that any longer.
Sure.
So now we move to the next level now.
Amazing. Yeah. With your association for so many years now with children with special needs, what is it that you have learned working with them?
The one thing I feel is that we always think that, we are here to help them or something like that. But actually, it's probably the other way around, because they come with a very clear spiritual purpose of guiding all those people who are in their gambit or in their circle. So because of my children with special needs, our experiences have been defined by them. That I'm sitting and talking to you today is being dictated by their will, I think, or their larger plan. So it's not that we are here. They have chosen this destiny to maybe put certain people on their path. At the perspective of special needs, of people who, they do need to become functional, and we can help them with that. But at a higher level, they are the ones who are sending us on our journeys, our spiritual journeys and our destiny journeys. All the people who step inside our school, their lives have been impacted deeply by working with people with special needs. And it is certainly a calling. Everybody does not come into it's not for everybody. So I have learned that children with special needs have come to guide us into taking a certain path. So that has been my experience also. And many of our children, especially with autism, they have one foot in the higher world and one foot down. So they really have a lot of access to some deeper things, and we won't attribute it to them, because when we look at them, they're non-expressive. So certainly our experiences with them have been quite spiritual.
You are in a position today where you've achieved so much in your life. What is success to you?
I hear this, people calling me successful. I don't really feel successful in that manner. I don't feel I've reached the end of anything. I don't feel I've done anything. I just felt that I've been instrumental in galvanizing something, and I'm very grateful for that. Success for me, success is is a very personal notion. While some part of it is related to the world and the community and how society perceives you, it is very much to do with what you think of yourself. Have you met your highest potential? If I am capable of doing a certain thing, is my will and my conviction strong enough for me to take me there? Am I disciplined enough to guide myself there? Do I have the will and whatever it takes to take me to my highest potential? I think that is only success for me. I think I may be running schools, but if I'm not able to do ordinary tasks that I set for myself, so I think that success for me is so much about what standards I want to meet for myself. And that world perception of success, whether you have money, whether you've accomplished something, that is another story altogether. But at the end of it, do you feel completely fulfilled? Many of us are very gifted. We have it all. God has given us intelligence, and we've got education, we have certain financial security, and it is our dharma to affect and impact positively the lives of at least 10 people around us. So otherwise, we are not different from any cat and dog, you know. We eat, sleep, and give birth and then die. It's just not on. I think everybody must serve in this world. They have come, you serve. Okay, you get money for your service or don't get money for your service. That's also not the matter. But then are you really positively impacting a community in some way that you feel is fit? So that is a very important notion for me. If each one of us took that seriously, the world actually will be a different place. Like every housewife takes on 10 children and makes them literate. Imagine, you know, I think it's a dharma to do that. So that's also success for me.
Very inspirational, yes. I'm sure people who are watching our video will get some very positive insights and get motivated to have the will to do something better and serve.
Thank you.
Towards
Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
My absolute pleasure. We now move on to the second segment, which is the lighter side of you. How would you describe Vasudha Prakash in 3 words?
Kind, driven, spirited.
Happiest moment in your life? Name one.
I would say happiest moments in my life have always been our school annual days. We have like 100, 200 children, you know, and that experience makes me happy.
What are your strengths?
I'm quite action oriented.
Who is or who are your role models?
I don't have any one role model. I like different qualities in different people, and I construct my own person. That is my ideal, and that is my role model. I would say maybe on a second thought, Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, I would say somebody I really admire. Not in a religious, spiritual way is different, but what he stands for in this world, I admire him.
What things do you not like to do?
I don't like that part of my work which is only about putting out fires and, you know, making peace between people and that kind of smoothing ruffled feathers and catering to emotional needs of people. And the work, yeah, of children and people whom we work for therapy, that's what we do. But in the work realm, if you're only looking at those things, that tires me very much. I really want people to take on their jobs and get on with it. And then, you know, that part, putting that tires me. I don't like doing that. Yes. I'd like to do more progressive things and, you know, go forward instead of going on attending to the emotional needs of people.
Right. Your favorite food?
My favorite cuisine is always chaat, like street food. And my second favorite food is idli and dosa.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I do sing. So if I had maybe taken music a little seriously, that would have been like a vocation as well. So I come under the category of recreational singer. So I really enjoy singing very much. I really love to do my therapy. I use hypnotherapy and sometimes past life regression. I would really, that is, if not the school, that is something I would like to pursue in a very dogged manner. Yeah.
The first song which you fell in love with?
Carnatic music, I just love Chandrasekharam. Chandrasekharam Sada. I love that. That is one of my favorite songs in Carnatic. In Bollywood, too many. But recently, I just love Kabir songs, Sant Kabir, and also Sufi songs. Even like Kun Faya Kun or Khwaja Ji, they really, I find myself, I love those songs.
What do you do to relax?
I watch TV. I love to watch Hollywood TV serials and things like that. I just love. I also socialize. That is also very relaxing. I go meet people or hang out with friends. I just love.
Most favorable holiday spot?
Being in a resort where there is an ocean and greenery around me, just where I can chill. Yeah, not too much of sightseeing, but also intermittent sightseeing and some relaxing. Yeah, and good food.
Yes.
And company, good company.
I feel very inspired. So it's been a wonderful, inspiring talk. I really enjoyed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chitra.